5 big pharma scandals that actually happened. They promised to heal us. Instead, some of the biggest pharmaceutical companies on the planet buried the truth, bribed doctors, and let people die, all while raking in billions. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are documented, court-tested, government-fined facts. Today, we're breaking down 5 of the most jaw-dropping big pharma scandals in modern history. Stick around for number 3. It involves a fentanyl spray, a rap song, and a company founder who ended up in prison. Let's get into it. Scandal 1. Thalidomide, the drug that changed medicine forever. In the late 1950s, a West German pharmaceutical company called Grunenthal introduced a new sedative called thalidomide. It was marketed as a wonder drug, safe, gentle, and perfect for treating morning sickness in pregnant women. It was sold over the counter in dozens of countries without a prescription. No serious testing had been done on how it affected a developing fetus. The company simply assumed it was safe because it appeared safe in adults. It was not safe. Between the late 1950s and early 1960s, thousands of babies across Europe, Australia, Canada, and beyond were born with severe limb malformations, many without arms or legs, along with damage to their eyes, ears, and internal organs. Estimates suggest around 10,000 children were affected worldwide, and many more pregnancies ended in miscarriage or stillbirth as a direct result of the drug. Here's the part that makes this a scandal and not just a tragedy. Evidence later showed that Grunenthal received reports linking the drug to nerve damage and birth defects well before it pulled the product from shelves. Internal warnings were reportedly downplayed. Marketing continued. Doctors kept prescribing it. It took years of mounting pressure and a small group of tenacious doctors and journalists before the drug was finally withdrawn in most markets in 1961. In the United States, the disaster was almost entirely avoided thanks to one FDA reviewer named Frances Kelsey, who refused to approve the drug despite the manufacturer's political pressure and repeated resubmissions. Her stand is widely credited with directly shaping the modern U.S. drug approval process, including the requirement for rigorous safety testing before a drug ever reaches a pregnant woman's medicine cabinet. Grunenthal didn't formally apologize to victims until 2012, more than 50 years later. To this day, thalidomide survivors around the world continue to fight for expanded compensation. Scandal 2. Vioxx and the heart attacks Merck knew about. Fast forward to the late 1990s, pharmaceutical giant Merck launched a blockbuster painkiller called Vioxx, designed to treat arthritis and chronic pain without the stomach issues caused by older drugs like ibuprofen. It was a massive commercial success, generating billions of dollars in sales and heavily advertised directly to consumers. The problem: Vioxx significantly increased the risk of heart attacks and strokes. Internal company documents that surfaced during litigation suggested Merck's own researchers had data pointing to cardiovascular risks years before the drug was pulled from the market. Rather than a straightforward safety rollout, critics allege the company worked to shape how that risk was studied and discussed, including internal communications about physicians who were skeptical of the drug's safety profile. Merck has denied wrongdoing in many of these characterizations, but the paper trail was damning enough to fuel thousands of lawsuits. Vioxx was finally pulled from the market in 2004 after roughly 5 years of sales. Independent estimates published in medical journals suggested the drug may have contributed to tens of thousands of excess heart attacks and cardiac deaths in the United States alone during the years it was on the market, though the precise number remains debated by researchers to this day. Merck ultimately agreed to a settlement of approximately $4.85 billion to resolve the bulk of the personal injury claims, one of the largest pharmaceutical settlements in history at the time. The company also pleaded guilty to a criminal charge related to how it marketed a different drug during the same period, and paid additional fines to the U.S. government. Vioxx became a textbook case taught in business ethics and public health courses alike. A reminder that a drug can pass initial trials, dominate the market, and still be quietly killing people before regulators catch up. Scandal 3. Insys Therapeutics, the fentanyl rap video. This one sounds too outrageous to be real, but it is. Insys Therapeutics made a powerful fentanyl spray called Subsys, originally approved only for cancer patients experiencing severe breakthrough pain, patients already tolerant to serious opioids. Fentanyl, remember, is a drug so potent that even small doses can be lethal. To boost sales, prosecutors say Insys executives built a bribery scheme, paying doctors disguised as speaker fees to prescribe Subsys to patients who did not have cancer at all. Patients with routine back pain, migraines, or other conditions the drug was never approved for. Some of the highest prescribing doctors received tens of thousands of dollars from the company. Sales representatives allegedly pressured insurance companies by pretending to be medical staff to get approvals pushed through. And then there's the video. During a national sales conference, Insys employees performed and filmed an internal rap video celebrating high-dose prescriptions of the fentanyl spray, mocking prescribers who chose lower doses. The video later became one of the most damning pieces of evidence used against the company in court. The scheme unraveled into a sweeping federal racketeering case. In 2019, Insys founder John Kapoor was convicted and sentenced to prison, becoming the first pharmaceutical CEO convicted for his role in fueling the opioid crisis through this kind of scheme. Several other executives were also convicted. Insys itself filed for bankruptcy the same year and agreed to pay roughly $225 million to resolve criminal and civil liability with the federal government. It remains one of the starkest examples of a company allegedly treating a deadly opioid like a commodity to be pushed, not a medicine to be carefully controlled. Scandal 4: Purdue Pharma, OxyContin, and the opioid crisis. No list like this is complete without Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, and the family behind it, the Sacklers. When OxyContin launched in 1996, Purdue marketed it as a breakthrough, a powerful opioid painkiller with a time-release formula the company claimed made it far less addictive than older opioids. That claim became the foundation of one of the most aggressive pharmaceutical marketing campaigns in American history. Sales reps fanned out across the country. Doctors were flown to lavish education seminars, and prescribing bonuses were tied directly to sales volume. The claim of lower addiction risk turned out to be false, and internal documents later showed executives were aware of rising rates of abuse and diversion far earlier than the public was told. OxyContin became one of the most abused prescription drugs in America, and it's widely cited as a major accelerant of the opioid epidemic that has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans over the following decades. In 2007, Purdue and 3 executives pleaded guilty to federal criminal charges related to misbranding the drug and paid over $600 million in fines. But the bigger reckoning came more than a decade later. Facing thousands of lawsuits from states, cities, and individuals, Purdue filed for bankruptcy in 2019. What followed was a long, messy legal battle over how much the Sackler family would pay and whether they could shield themselves from future lawsuits. In June 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down an earlier settlement plan specifically because it would have granted the Sacklers broad legal immunity without their consent. That decision forced everyone back to the negotiating table. The result? A new $7.4 billion settlement, finalized and confirmed in 2025, now recognized as the largest settlement to date involving individuals held responsible for the opioid crisis. Under the deal, the Sackler family agreed to pay up to $6.5 billion over 15 years. Purdue contributed roughly $900 million more. The family was permanently banned from ever selling opioids in the United States again, and they lost control of the company entirely. Purdue's operations were handed to a newly formed entity overseen by an independent board with no ties to the Sacklers. It's a case that shows how even after bankruptcy, criminal guilty pleas, and public outrage, it can take a Supreme Court ruling and the better part of a decade before real accountability lands. Scandal 5: GlaxoSmithKline's $3 billion fraud settlement. Our final scandal involves GlaxoSmithKline, one of the largest drug makers in the world, and what remains one of the biggest healthcare fraud settlements in U.S. history. In 2012, GSK agreed to plead guilty and pay $3 billion to resolve criminal and civil charges brought by the U.S. Department of Justice. The allegations were sweeping. Prosecutors said the company illegally promoted the antidepressant Paxil for use in patients under 18, even though it wasn't approved for that age group, and did so in part by distributing a misleading published medical article that downplayed risks. The company was also accused of promoting the antidepressant Wellbutrin for uses well beyond its approved purposes, including weight loss and sexual dysfunction, none of which were backed by approval from regulators. On top of that, GSK was accused of failing to report important safety data to the FDA about its diabetes drug Avandia, including data related to potential cardiac risks, for years, while the drug remained on the market and continued generating substantial sales. Prosecutors also alleged the company used a range of tactics to influence prescribing behavior, including sponsoring lavish trips and entertainment for physicians, framed as educational events. The $3 billion settlement remains one of the largest payouts by a pharmaceutical company in history, and it became a landmark case for how the U.S. government pursues off-label marketing violations and failure to disclose safety data across the entire industry. The pattern behind all five. Look at these 5 cases side by side, and a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. A company identifies a serious risk. Instead of stopping to fix it, leadership makes a calculated bet that the profits from continued sales will outweigh the eventual cost of lawsuits, fines, and settlements. Sometimes that bet involves burying internal data. Sometimes it involves bribing doctors. Sometimes it takes literal decades and a Supreme Court ruling before real accountability arrives. None of this means every drug or every pharmaceutical company is dangerous. Modern medicine has saved and extended countless lives, including through drugs made by many of the same companies on this list. But these 5 cases are a reminder that the system relies on regulators, journalists, whistleblowers, and sometimes a single stubborn reviewer willing to say no to keep that profit motive in check. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, you'll probably want to see how the money and incentives actually work behind the scenes of the healthcare industry. Because pharma is far from the only player in this game.